This is Ethan Sawyer, the college essay guy, doing my best to bring more ease, joy, and purpose into the college application process. Welcome to the College Essay Guy podcast, where it's my job to interview the most brilliant minds in the college admissions world, analyze their genius, and break it down for you into a series of practical, actionable steps that you can take whether you're applying to college yourself or helping someone else apply. I've almost got that memorized. So this is episode 3 of 3 with the amazing Jeff Levy and Jenny Kent. Last episode, if you heard it, was Jenny talking about which schools are the most generous with financial aid for international students. The episode before that, you heard Jeff talking about which schools are most generous with domestic students, which is to say students applying from the U.S. And for the first time on this podcast, we're doing a double interview. This one happens to be my favorite, and it's because of the topic. It's a kind of a controversial topic. The question is, should you apply early decision or not? Is there a statistical advantage to applying early or not? Well, when making this decision, it might be kind of nice to know what the regular decision acceptance rate is for a school that you're interested in and what the early decision acceptance rate is for a school. And, then compare those numbers. But imagine if you had to do that for all the schools that you're applying to. In fact, imagine if you had to do that for over 200 schools. Wouldn't it be better if somebody else just did that work for you? That's exactly what Jeff and Jenny have done. They spent weeks, maybe months last year poring over college admissions websites, calling admissions reps, and sometimes calling them back, asking for their numbers so that they could put together for you in a neat little spreadsheet all this information. And then they did it again this past year. Why would you do such a thing, you ask? Well, that's the first thing that we cover on the episode. After that, we talk about why did they choose the particular metrics that they chose? In other words, why do these numbers matter? What are some of the dangers of interpreting this data? And who is early decision right for? And who's it not right for? Is it right for everybody? And of course, we talk about how you can use this chart practically when you're applying to college or when you're helping someone else apply. I'm so excited that I want to end this intro right here and let you get right into the episode. So here goes. Hi, friends. Welcome to the College Essay Guy podcast. This is episode 3 of 3. I'm with Jeff Levy and Jenny Kent, and I'm so excited to be here with both of them. This is the first time I'm doing this, where I'm interviewing two folks at once. So we have not so meticulously planned out this interview, so there will be some talking over each other. We are in different area codes and different countries, which is hashtag technology is amazing. You can listen to their longer bios on the episodes 1 and 2 of this. But in short, I'll start with Jenny. Jenny is a member of IECA, HECA. Well, you know what? I don't even know if you guys even know what these things mean. But if you're interested in all the designations that she has, the important one, I think the big one, is this Certified Educational Planner. She spent a bunch of years helping students through the college application process. And in my episode, I talked with her about how international students can figure out which schools give money and how much money they give and how many students they give it to. So you can check that out if you're interested. And with Jeff, who's also here, he is also a member of a bazillion organizations that make him super legit and qualified to be here. That's the joke I always make, Jeff. I hope it's okay that I'm making that joke with you. He teaches, he's a counselor who teaches other counselors how to be better counselors. And he's based out of Los Angeles. Jenny's based out of Bogota. And guys, thanks for doing this. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
So
thank you.
I want to jump right in, and I want to get to, what is this resource? I'll just say that when I heard that somebody had created this, I was like, what? That's awesome. So maybe let's start with just, what is this? Maybe Jeff, you can start with just tell us what is the resource, and then Jenny, you can tell us a little bit about why this resource was created in the first place.
Sounds good.
We call it the Early Decision and Regular Decision Acceptance Rate Chart. It's pretty straightforward. It has, I think, Jenny, how many colleges total? Do you remember? I'm scanning through it now.
It has every college that has an early decision plan. So it's
exactly
slightly over 400, I believe.
No. I think this one, I'm looking at it now, actually. So it's
280 something.
It's about 215. And then we have a handful, and we have, we've got so many charts. How can you possibly keep track of them all? And then at the bottom of that chart, we have a little bonus section, which has 6 colleges that offer single choice early action. as opposed to early decision. We'll probably get into that later. Ethan, is now a good time for me to describe in detail what the chart looks like, or do you want me to hold off on that?
Let's do it. Tell us what's on the chart, and then we can go back and define the terms.
Okay. It's got the list of colleges. It's got their early decision acceptance rate. It then has a column for their regular decision acceptance rate. And this is the big deal. This is the present under the tree, because it's easy to find early decision acceptance rates. It's easy to find overall acceptance rates. But one of the things we do with this chart, one of the several things we do that you won't find elsewhere, is that we extract the regular decision acceptance rate, so you can really see the difference between the two. Moving through the chart, we also have a column for the percent of the class, of the freshman class, filled from early decision. And this can be quite an eye-opener. We have another column which has the ED, early decision, to RD, regular decision, acceptance ratio. So that will give you a kind of just a straight numerical description of, is it crazy out of whack? Is it 1-to-1? So you can quickly kind of, see where it all falls in there. And then we have a column which lists the additional admission plan. So some early decision colleges also have an early action plan. That's good to know. Some early decision colleges have ED2, which we can maybe go into a little bit later. So that column will list the additional plans. Finally, the last column is the source of the data. And in most cases, it's going to be from the Common Data Set 2016-2017. So I'm going to take a breath here and let you guys talk for a moment.
Thank you. You set us up beautifully. Jenny, help us first. I'm going to ask a two-parter. So first, help us define some terms. What's early decision? What's early action? And if you could, what's common data set? And then give us some sense of why this chart came to be in the first place.
Okay. I'm just writing down what it is that you want me to define here so that I do it in the right order. So early decision and early action, as well as regular decision, are basically their application plans that colleges offer. So an early decision plan means that the student is going to apply ahead of time, and they're basically agreeing ahead of time to a binding decision, so that if the university says, hey, you're in, the student guarantees that they will attend the school. And early action, the student will also apply early, will also get an admission decision earlier. I should have said that with early decision and early action. Students will usually hear, just before or around the start of the new calendar year. But early action is non-binding. So that means you're going to apply early, you're going to hear early, but you don't have to decide until May 1st where you want to go. And then the common data set, which Jeff mentioned, it's basically, it's exactly what it says it is. It's a common data set that universities fill out. And they distribute to things like guidebooks and Big Future that the College Board has. So it's just a set of basic information about the university. It has many different sections that gets filled out by the university, so that you basically can have all of the information about every university that you want. The trick with the common data set, Ethan, is that some universities just have them, right up there on their website. They're easy to find. Other universities won't share them. Some universities will share them, but they don't make it easy to find them. And so one of the things that Jeff and I love to do is to track down those common data sets.
How much do you love to do that?
Jenny love it.
Jenny loves it more than I do, for sure.
What kind of work did you put in to do this, to put this information together? And if you could give us some sense of why you picked, what you picked, the data points that you picked. And either one of you can answer that.
Go for it.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Go for it, Jenny.
So in terms of the amount of work that we put in, I don't think I could even calculate. We produce these charts annually, and I think it's fair to say we start thinking about it in March because that's when a lot of the private institutions will have their common data sets finished. But it goes all the way through August. Many of the public institutions cannot post their common data sets until state budgets have been kind of decided on. So usually by, September 1st at the latest, you can get a common data set. So it's really a labor of love. I love it when I can just find it online. That's great. But I now have, I have many email threads with admission offices where I, politely ask and then beg for them to share the information with us. So lots and lots of time goes into that. And I already forgot the second part of your question.
So why did you choose these particular data points?
Jeff, why don't you take that?
Well, we're both, Jenny and I are data nerds. We kind of love quantifying things, and I know I'm petrified of not knowing what's really going on. Of not being informed. So I want to see the data. I mean, I just need to see it. At the same time, I know that there's a limitation to what the data can tell us. But there are stories behind the numbers. And I just think it's so cool to uncover what's kind of going on through this information.
That's super interesting. Can I jump on that? What stories do you see coming out of this chart?
Well, if we look at the percent of class filled from early decision, we'll see numbers that are all over the place. And I think so. For example, here, let me. Northeastern, 9% of their class is filled from early decision. Middlebury College, an outlier in the other direction, 66% of their freshman class is filled from early decision, and plenty that are between them. So I think it's part of the information that counselors and consultants and families need to have to be able to make smart decisions about where to apply when.
Follow that through a little bit. So when you see numbers like this, 9% of the class at Northeastern and 66% of the class at Middlebury, how does that help students decide where to apply? Like what stories do you make up about that?
Jenny, what you may want to jump in here.
Sure. I'll jump in. If I look at a school like Northeastern, that they're accepting 29% of their students during a regular decision and 27% for early decision. Clearly, there's no advantage to putting an early decision application into Northeastern. I mean, there's no admission advantage anyway. It's great if that's the school that you're in love with and you want to go to, but it's not easier to get in during the early decision round. And, they're only taking 9% of their class. So it's not like Northeastern has this policy where they're like, wow, we're going to fill, 50% of our class. We're going to lock it in during early decision. That's just not the story at Northeastern versus, Middlebury, which Jeff mentioned, that when you have a 13% acceptance rate during the regular decision round versus a 43% acceptance rate during early decision, and they're taking 66% of their class, there might be an advantage to applying there early. So, that's why these numbers are so important. And, like Jeff said, numbers don't lie. That's why we love them.
But they don't tell the whole story. And so just to follow up with what Jenny said, it doesn't therefore mean that at Middlebury, which has a 3.5 to 1 ratio of early decision acceptance rate to regular decision, it doesn't therefore mean it's going to be 3.5 times easier for any applicant to get in early decision. These are not identical cohorts of applicants, and that's something that Jenny and I both caution our students about. The early decision round is made up of a higher number of athletes, of legacy students, of students who are just more applicants who are more savvy about the application process. So than the regular decision round is. So it doesn't say everything, but it certainly does say a lot to inform what might become a smarter college application strategy.
Mm-hmm. So, Jenny, in a second, I want to talk to you about who you feel like early decision may or may not be right for. Before we get into that, tell me a little bit more about why you feel like this resource is important.
Well, I think as I mentioned in the other podcast, it's hard to play a game if you don't know the rules. Jeff and I don't believe in gaming the system, but, you do need to understand, how everything works. Otherwise, you can't have a good strategy. So it's really important to use this chart just to have a better strategy. And I think what happens with both of us, Ethan, is that, we work for usually a really long time with a student developing a list. And then, there comes a point in time where every student we work with, might have some schools on their list that offer ED. And the question is this your dream school? And if it is, are you going to take advantage of that plan or not? So it's really about helping the family make the best possible decision.
Right. So great. That's a beautiful segue. So who do you feel like early decision is right for, and who is it not right for?
Most coaches encourage their recruits to apply early decision. They want to lock in, their teams early. Many schools will give a bump to a legacy applicant only if they apply in the early decision round, and that bump may disappear if they're applying regular decision. As we've been discussing, students who are very clear about what is their first choice, not just because there's an admission advantage, but because they really believe the school is the best school for them. If they're ready to apply in mid-October, and we'll have the strongest application they can put together by that early stage, ED can be a very smart choice.
I think early decision is right for the student who wants to marry a school because it's a binding decision. And so if, I had a student come into my office, a few weeks ago, Ethan, and said, so which school should I apply to early decision? And I said, well, there's your answer. Maybe none, because, it's early. There's a lot of, stress and anxiety. And I think, a lot of students just, want to commit. But, if you're not in love with a school and you can't picture yourself on their campus for 4 years, it's probably, not the right choice. And I also think, if there are students who can't commit to paying full freight, they really should think about it carefully because it's a binding decision. And while, yes, you are allowed to get out of the decision if, your financial need isn't met, I don't know how clearly that's defined. Right. I think there are families who think they have a certain amount of financial need, but that a university would see it a little bit differently.
I want to underline that I'm pretty discouraged. I really discourage families who expect to get financial aid away from applying early decision. I don't think in most cases it's a smart choice. We can't be mechanical about it. There are financial aid families who may apply early decision to schools that meet 100% of need. But in most cases, financial aid awards are so varied school to school, even between schools that say they meet 100% of need, that it is usually in the family's best interest not to put admissibility second and to put affordability first, and at the end of the process to compare the financial aid offers and possibly to appeal one or two of them to make sure that they're getting the best possible offer. So generally not a smart strategy for financial aid families.
So with great power comes great responsibility. And I make up that having these numbers, gives students some more power and gives students some more, at least context for understanding, what the numbers are and how this game works. Jenny, talk to me about how does a student is listening to this podcast, how can they use this chart to better inform their development of their college list and just their college application process? Because when I look at this, if I'm a kid and I see American University has an 85% early decision acceptance rate and only a 23% regular decision acceptance rate, I'm like, great, I'm applying to American. But why is that potentially flawed? How do you help students, how is this in the larger constellation of resources that use them, how can this help them in their process?
Yeah, I think Jeff and I both think that the first step is just to create a really great list. And by a really great list, you want to look at schools that are a financial fit, a social fit, and an academic fit. I just think that's and I would really push the social fit a lot. That's sort of one of the things that I'm really big at, and the financial. The academics actually probably for me lower down, because I think that you can go to the best program in the country, but if you're not with your people, it's going to be really hard for you to be happy and be successful. Especially, I work with a lot of international students. They're very far away from home. So if they don't feel a connection, that can be really, really tough. So I think you need to kind of be with your people. You need to be at a school that's affordable, and you need to be at a school that's going to give you the academics that you want. That would be the very first thing, really.
Great. And just real quick, I'd just be curious, Jenny, what resources do you use to help students develop their initial list, even before we look at this chart, say?
Oh, wow. Well, a big resource is my brain, because I spend a lot of time traveling and visiting campuses, particularly because I work with so many international families who can't do that. So, I do really in-depth student interviews and parent interviews to kind of get a feel for what sort of a campus I think a student would fit well at. As for finances, again, I have the family come up with their estimated family contribution, as I spoke about in the earlier podcast, to figure out, is there financial need? Is there not financial need? And, in terms of academics, I think there are lots of different resources that you can use. I'm a very big fan of collegedata.com. They have lots of information, and I'm a big fan of those common data sets. Because I think when it comes to academics, you really want to know, like, am I in the ballpark or no? I can't tell you the number of parents who come in my office and they say, well, if my child doesn't apply to Harvard, obviously they can never get in. But if you're not, sort of like what I call academically in the ballpark, I'm not sure that it's worth it. Mm-hmm. So, I like to use college data and common data sets to kind of look and see, okay, are my test scores, at least in the average range? GPAs can be tricky to compare, but I like to kind of look at my students' GPA versus the average GPA of universities. And I use the university websites all the time. I think, students and I really dig deep and look and say, like, hey, does this have a program and a curriculum that really appeals to me?
Beautiful. Talk to me, Jeff. What's your process? How do you help students? What are the resources you use? And then when does this chart come in? At what point in the process?
Well, I'll pick up where Jenny left off. I'm also a very big believer in the college website. I mean, of course, there's some slick marketing involved in that, but I love going to the list of a college's majors, introducing that to the student, and just having them kind of go through the list and stopping at a major that looks cool to them And then we'll click on that. We'll dive in. We'll look at what some of the core courses are for that major, what some of the electives are. It really helps students kind of picture what it is they might want to study in college. That's an important part of of figuring out which colleges fit for them. I love the Fisk guide. I think it's unparalleled in the way it describes what a place is like, what it feels like, what it might be like to go there. I don't use this early decision, regular decision chart early in the process, and I think we've been harping on that a lot. That in the process of pulling together an entire list of colleges that make sense for the student, and in helping them get to the point where they begin to have some favorites, and in determining whether a student will actually be ready to apply by mid-October, we can then begin to look at our chart and say, okay, you seem to love these two schools more than all the other ones on your list for some very good reasons. Does it make sense to apply early decision? Will you be ready for it? Do you want to? And let's look at some of the stats that those schools to indicate to us whether it might be an admission advantage applying to those schools. So that's when I would bring it in to the process.
So what I'm hearing from both of you guys is don't use this chart to make your college list. Figure out based on, you mentioned financial, social, academic factors, using some of the resources you mentioned. Okay, what's a great list? And then we bring this chart in and go, okay, based on these schools that I'm really excited about, maybe I can start taking into account some of these numbers when I'm trying to figure out where I want to apply early decision. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yep. That's it.
And okay. Ethan, I would love to jump on a little bit to
Please.
Something that Jeff said when he mentioned, are you going to be ready to apply in time? Mm-hmm. Because that's a big one too. I think, I live in a last minute culture, so rarely are my students ready to apply on time.
A last minute culture. I like that. So give me some examples, Jenny, so that students have a specific understanding of how to actually practically use this chart. Can you think of examples of students who've used it and how it's informed their process?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like Claremont McKenna College. That's a school that appeals to a lot of students who I work with. They have a nice number of international students. They're, really kind of all about developing leaders. And when you look at Claremont McKenna, it has a 7% acceptance rate in the regular decision. So that's really low. Obviously, that's, what I call a lottery school. Even the most qualified applicant, good luck. Mm-hmm. Early decision, it's 32%. And they're also filling 68% of their class in the early decision round. So there's no question in my mind that there's an advantage applying to Claremont McKenna early. That's kind of one of the big schools that my students applied to.
Great. Jeff, what about for you? What are there students that, if there are specific students that you've used this with that you could see, again, and what we're looking at is more of the storytelling, right? When you look at things like this, what are you making this mean? And if you can tie that to any specific students that you can think of, that'd be great.
Well, there was a student last year who was set on applying to Stanford, single choice early action, where we know there's not really a very big advantage in applying single choice early action. And of course, the admit rates are minuscule, they're microscopic. So we developed a strategy with that family that he would apply single choice early action to Stanford. And then we looked at, because he would hear by hopefully December 15th. And if he was deferred or denied from Stanford, we then had a plan B where he would apply early decision 2 to his second choice college, which for him was University of Chicago. So we can I think that's a really reasonable strategy to go for the stars. Not that UChicago is an easy school to get into because it's almost as difficult as Stanford, but at least they do have this early decision 2 plan where students who get deferred or denied in early decision 1 still have an opportunity to advantage their admission chances.
Great. Tell us what, for folks who don't understand what early decision 2 is, what is it and when is it typically?
So early decision 2 often is the same deadline as regular decision. It could be January 1st, it could be January 15th, but it's like ED1, it's still a binding contract.
All right, so I'm a student listening, and this was a podcast about early decision and regular decision, but what I really want is you guys to just give me the answer. Should I apply early decision or regular decision or early action or what? And I want to hear from both of you. So give me whatever answer pops up in your brains for that.
I can jump in on this. I'm, a supposed expert on this, and when my daughters were applying to college, I urged my older one, who was applying to some very selective schools, I urged her, take advantage of the early decision bump. You got to do it. And she refused. She was one of these people who wanted to apply to a whole list of great schools and see who loved her before she was going to commit to any one of them. Fine, she did well. She got into to many of the schools she applied to, and then she made a great decision at the end, which one she loved the most. My younger daughter, I urged her not to apply early decision. I didn't want her to commit to one school. I felt like she really needed to get to know a whole bunch of schools before deciding, to see who accepted her before deciding which one she wanted to go to. She didn't listen to me either. She applied early decision, got into her early decision school, and went there. The lesson, I think, is that it's really up to the student. It's right for some kids. It's not right for others. Early action may make more sense for some students, may not for others. In the end, it's really about what makes sense for each individual applicant.
Mm-hmm. Jenny, what's your take? Thank you, Jeff.
Well, Jeff brought up, I guess first I'll say, I feel like I've kind of, said my piece about early decision. I think you have to be in love with the school. It has to make sense for you for a whole bunch of reasons. I don't believe it's like, which school should I apply to? Early decision. And when it comes to early action, I'm actually not a huge fan of early action. I think, for one, as I mentioned, my international students aren't usually ready to apply in the early rounds. And a lot of times that's just because they haven't kind of, gotten all the pieces together, but also they almost always need that first semester of senior year to show, more grades. A lot of my students tend to really figure it out like the summer before senior year. They're like, oh my gosh, like college is almost here. And, I need to be a little bit more focused on academics. And so I like to give them that complete, first semester. So I don't, encourage early action there. And what I think, and, I don't know if this is true, but this is just kind of my theory, is I think that, for the same reason that we said earlier, that it doesn't always make sense for a student to apply in the early decision round if they have financial need. I feel like the students who apply in the early action round are very often real superstars. These are kids who are high achieving a lot of times across the board, but have financial need. So they aren't applying in the early decision round. So, unless I'm working with a student who's a real rock star, I try to talk them out of early action. And, I don't mind saying here, I have students that argue with me about this every single year. And every year we kind of agree, like, okay, then choose one and apply to one early. And I think for a lot of it, Ethan, is just they want this process to be over.
Yeah.
You know, they're worn out by the application process. They just want it to be over. So I don't feel like they're applying early for the right reasons.
Jenny's students aren't the only ones who argue with her. I do too about early action. We don't completely agree on this. I think it varies. It varies school to school whether it might be a disadvantage for students to apply in that round, whether it's much of an advantage for students to apply in that round. I completely agree with her that a lot of students are not ready. But sometimes just wanting to get it over with is not such a bad thing. I mean, if a student does find out that they've gotten into 2 or 3 or 4 of their top choices by mid-December, what a relief to have it over with. You know, you don't have to sweat it out through April 1st. So that can be an advantage. So I don't know, you know, it's sort of, I take it on a case-by-case basis.
How do you guys advise students in terms of writing their essays? Do you tell them, wait till you find out? Or do you kind of say, once they've turned in their early decision, if a student has applied early decision, do you tell them, okay, now start working on those other essays as though you're not going to get into the school? Or do you say, wait it out until December and see?
I don't think I use the word wait ever in my work with students. I think Jenny and I are pretty similar here with our calendars. I send out a blast to all of my students in late October, early November, that I'm done working with you mid-December. all of your applications must be complete and submitted by the Sunday prior to winter break.
I just sent that email out 3 days ago.
You know, some years I'm not quite as early as I'd like to be. But the reason for this is, number one, I want a break over Christmas. I don't want to be getting applications December 29th. Oh my God, please look at no, I'm done. And I want the students to know that they really need to be done weeks before. So, no, they can't wait until they hear from their early decision school that they've been deferred. In most cases, that will be the case, or in some cases denied. On December 20th, they're going to begin to do the rest of their applications. No, they must proceed from September, realizing that they may not get into their early decision school and preparing all the rest of their applications as if they will need to submit them.
Great. Jenny?
Yeah, I do the same thing as Jeff, except I'm less generous. So I actually ask my students to have everything done the Monday before Thanksgiving, which is interesting because the majority of my students don't celebrate Thanksgiving. But anyway, I always give them the Monday before
But you
Thanksgiving. Do. Exactly. I do. It's the one time of the year that I cook. So I need to really focus on that so I don't burn everything or have a dry turkey. No, you know, what happens down here is we have very different calendars. So there are 3 different academic calendars in Colombia. And, you know, in early December, we have something called Noche de Velitas. And pretty much from that point forward, it's like the entire country grinds to a halt and very little work gets done until the end of January. And so what I say to the students is, I want everything the Monday before Thanksgiving so that at the very latest, you know, your school-based counselor, if they even have one, because many schools down here don't, you know, knows by December 1st you've got everything done. Because if they wait until the holidays, the school won't send anything in. There's no one there. The school's closed down and they're closed till the end of January. So I really encourage them, you know, I say like, we're just going to know that it's there, it's ready to send if you need to send it. Waiting, not a good idea.
Great. I hope you're scaring some kids a little bit right now. And they're like, oh my gosh, what? If that's a takeaway, that's
so.
Yeah, right? Okay.
Yeah, actually what I did yesterday, Ethan, what I did yesterday with a bunch of students who are straggling is we mapped out due dates for every single remaining essay that they have. Just so that I really was like trying to drive home. This is not going past the Monday before Thanksgiving.
And I'm so glad that they're going to meet. So glad they're going to meet all those deadlines perfectly for you. And
yeah, exactly.
Just like clockwork, they're just going to send it to you. They're going to show up in your inbox. It's going to be awesome.
They actually almost always do.
Really?
It's pretty rare that they don't. Yeah.
That's great. What do you do? How do you make that happen? What's your secret?
I think I have a dominant personality.
Mm-hmm. No. It's a lot of fear. So, all right, guys, I'm going to throw this situation. I didn't prep you for this, but say you're applying to college now. Where do you apply, and do you apply early or do you not apply early?
Oh.
All right. I'll go out on a limb and say that I would apply to Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and I would apply early decision. They've got a pretty nice advantage in early decision. And I would be willing to apply their early decision because it's one of my favorite schools. I love the combination of academics and politics and creative stuff that goes on there. And I think that would be my best choice.
Lovely. Jenny?
Okay, well, Jeff and I actually were both just on a tour of Minnesota schools, and I have been drinking the McAllister Kool-Aid since I was on their campus. I loved everything about it, and luckily for me, I love the winter. So I think I could be really happy at McAllister. I don't know, though, that I would apply early anywhere, because I'm a girl who likes to have choices. So I think, for sure McAllister would be on my list. But, do I want to marry it? I don't know. Not sure. I like Tulane a lot too, and it's warmer.
It's definitely warmer. I remember just walking through that campus and just sort of like feeling that Miami stickiness as I was, from high school. So I was just scanning through the chart being like, ooh, cool, shopping. That my first impulse was to say, I think if I'm being really honest with you, I think I'd be one of those kids that would apply to highly selectives because of that. And this is the kid I was. Like, I applied to Harvard for undergrad, applied to Yale for grad, got rejected by both. But I'm one of those kids who's like, and this is part of my personality, is like a dreamer who like would want to give it a shot and see. My second answer was, y'all, I had such a great experience. And this is not a very interesting answer, but at Northwestern, that I don't think I could have been happier anywhere else. So I think my second, like, more measured answer is like, I'd apply to Northwestern ED. And then, but I'd be smart enough, I think, to like forget that I'm actually going to get in there and assume that I'm not going to. And I would have worked on, a wide range of schools, blah, blah, blah. And I would have had some of those reaches in there, assuming, because I don't think I'd actually would have gotten into Northwestern now. I'm trying to think of like what my credits would be now, which is a weird thing to think about.
I didn't know that we were supposed to think that way.
Oh, no. And
I'd be in trouble.
So, but, other schools that I've loved, I mean, and this is where my wife and I joke, but I'm like, oh, Zola, our daughter, I'm like, oh, she's going to like UCLA, like, because it's going to be probably a little bit less expensive, and so I'm getting like really practical with it. So there's another part of me that's like, you know what, these UCs are pretty great. And so I would definitely apply to all the UCs. Not all of them. I'd apply to 6 of them. But, so those would definitely be on my list because I think that there's some, great opportunities there. So yeah, this is fun. All right. So show and tell. What have you got? Show and tell is the portion of this is the first time listening to the podcast where we share a resource or a book we're reading, or it could be, a plant that you really love, as my first show and tell guest shared. So what have you got? Jeff, what have you brought for, actually, Jenny, I'm going to go with you first. What have you brought for show and tell?
Well, for show and tell, I have brought the website Cadenza, and that's with a K, Kadenze. I love it. It's a few years old, and basically it was a bunch of like really cool art and design schools that all decided to have a website together and offer online classes. And so there's like different levels of membership. You can, just have a free membership and audit classes, or you can pay and take classes and do the assignments and get a grade. And then you actually, at the end, if you would like, you can also pay to receive credit. So I'm one of these people, I just like in my free time, I like to study. So, when I'm not on Duolingo, I'm on Cadenza. And, right now I'm taking a class on fashion style icons.
Love it. Jeff, what do you got?
For show and tell, I am recommending that your listeners open their favorite newspaper and read the Paradise Papers. These are, the articles about the Paradise Papers. They were like over 1 million leaked documents telling the world what the wealthiest people and corporations are doing to hide their money. And it even includes colleges and university endowments that they have been investing in offshore accounts to avoid, to maximize their investments and to invest in instruments that normally they would have to pay taxes on, but offshore they don't. So I have found the stories over the last few days to be really fascinating about what goes on behind the scenes.
Beautiful. I'm inspired by both of you generally, but Cadenza reminded me, Jenny, of my latest obsession is Masterclass, and it's something that's maybe pops up in folks' Facebook feeds because they do a lot of Facebook ads. But Masterclass basically takes some of the brightest minds and coolest people in our world, David Mamet, Shonda Rhimes, Steve Martin, and they teach a masterclass that you can basically walk through what it takes to write country music by Reba McEntire, or what does a Werner Herzog's filmmaking course look like. So there's a cool offer. I don't know if this will be good when folks listen to this, but you can get the classes for like $90 each, or for a whole year you could do it's like $180, and you can get access to all the classes for a year. So I will be binge watching these over the next couple of weeks.
Very cool.
So
let's not forget Diane von Furstenberg's masterclass.
I know,
don't forget fashion.
That's coming up. I know. I'm excited about. I'm geeky. I'm kind of a chess nerd, so I'm super stoked about the Gary Kasparov one. Jeff, Jenny, thank you so much. I really appreciate you and appreciate this resource. And y'all can check it out on the show notes page, collegeessayguide.com/podcast. Have a beautiful day. Hi, friends. Thanks for listening. You'll find the link to this awesome resource, the PDF version and the Excel doc version, in the show notes, which you'll find at collegeessayguide.com/podcast. And while you're there, if you would be so kind as to leave a review, subscribe to the podcast, I would so appreciate it. As always, stay curious.